I'm recording now, fingers crossed. So hi everyone, thank you so much for being here this morning. For those of you who don't know me, and I think that's probably everybody here right now, I'm Allison Boyer. I am the director of the brand new Center for Teaching and Learning here at Collin College. And like the center, obviously I am new to the college as well. So I'm really excited to meet all of you here today, even though it's virtually. And I'm really excited for you to join me for this webinar. Everybody can still hear me okay, right? Yeah, okay, yes. Good deal, thank you. So there's potential for us to have a pretty big group here today. So if you haven't already done so already, I'm just gonna ask that you mute your mic, unless you're speaking, of course, and then, unmute it. And maybe turn off your video as well, just so we can preserve bandwidth for the big group. But if you want to turn your video back on when you're speaking, that's fine too. But if you don't want to turn it on, I get it. I totally understand. So this is the first in a 3-part webinar series that I am hosting this month, focusing on online teaching for obvious reasons. While distance education has undoubtedly been a growing trend in higher education for many years now, it has obviously really risen to the forefront this spring. Again, we all know why. And as we went into crisis mode in March, so many faculty members had to rush to move their classes online, and that is certainly not an ideal situation. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen right now. Okay, can everybody see that? See the slideshow? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so I am wondering how many of you taught online for the first time this spring? You can say it out loud if you want.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Good deal. So one thing I would really love to ask you is if you could describe, using one word, what this spring was like for you, what would that be? You can type it into the chat so that everybody can see. Exciting, chaos, stressful, hectic, wow. Scrambling, yes. Challenging, but good. Excellent. That's pretty much what I was expecting. I'm glad to hear that there are some good descriptors and not just negative descriptors. But I wanted to give us all the chance to kind of get those feelings out before we kind of launch into this. Because I'm pretty sure we all have some feelings about this spring, and probably some feelings about what we're going to experience in the fall, even though we're still kind of trying to figure out what that's going to be. Let's see here. So I also want to start with a few questions here. So in terms of teaching strategies, and not technology, okay? Not technology, just teaching strategies. What kind of things did you feel like you all struggled with in the online classroom this past spring? Maybe especially those of you for whom it was your first time teaching online. Engagement, discussion boards, change in mindset, absolutely. Yep, student engagement. excitement, increased grading, yes. Yeah, again, that's a lot of what I was expecting. Format, yeah. So my next question for you then is, what did your students appear to struggle with? And maybe it's the same as what you struggled with, maybe it's different. Technology, yes. Cheating, time management, absolutely. Following instructions, basic computer skills. Kind of shocking, isn't it? You know, we think that this is really you know, our students are digital natives, but when it comes down to it, they don't necessarily know all of the things we assume they know. Personal things, absolutely. Job loss, taking care of kids, being with their families. Yes. Distractions, absolutely. So my last question for you here is, what surprised you about your online teaching experience in the spring, if anything? Maybe it was exactly how you expected it to be, but was there anything that really surprised you about it, good or bad? Adaptability, time consuming, yes. Motivation and resilience of our students, yes, absolutely. Learning new things. Being able to pause speeches when you're grading them online. I hadn't thought about that. That is really helpful. You know, even despite the chaos, the class went okay. Class bonding. Yeah, thank goodness for Zoom, right? Yeah. Okay, that's great. So I like to think about not only what we struggled with, but, you know, some of the positive things that came from it. I've heard some responses from faculty, a lot of them expressing appreciation for how hardworking their students were, and someone mentioned resilience in the chat as well, and I think that's great that we can be appreciative for some of the things that happened and things that we learned this past spring. So fortunately, while we didn't have the ideal situation in the spring where we got to really improve and be really thoughtful about how we were planning our online courses, because we had to just hurry up and rush and get them online. Fortunately, this summer we have a little bit more time to be thoughtful about designing the online courses that we may be teaching in the fall. And even those who are teaching face-to-face in the fall, at least as far as we know at the moment, are probably going to have to move some course components online, whether to accommodate a hybrid version of the course or a blended course format for social distancing purposes. And those bring with them their own struggles, I think, and complications. But we also, I think it's been told to us many times from our administration that we still need to be prepared to move fully online in case there's, you know, another outbreak of the virus, or, you know, things get even worse than they are now and we have to go back to the work from home mode. So my plan for us today is to just focus on some general principles of best practice for teaching online. And I sent you all the references yesterday or this morning, but I just want to reiterate that all the things that we're going to talk about today are backed up by research. So the other two webinars that are going to be in this series are going to focus on more specific areas. The next one, which is next week, will be about assessment practices in an online environment. And then the third one will be about student engagement, which hopefully you're really excited about, since so many of you brought that up as something that you struggle with this spring. And again, just a reminder, We're focusing on teaching methodology today rather than technology. So I'm not going to be talking about how to use Canvas or how to use Zoom or anything like that. The good news is that we have the ELC, and they already do an amazing job with all of those professional development trainings. And if at any time, if you have a question, feel free to type it into the chat and I will do my very best to keep up with those. Yes, the ELC absolutely rocks. I'm so grateful for them too. Okay, so let's start talking about the major principles. So the first one, in terms of best practices, is just to be there. You need to be there as an instructor. And what I mean by that is you need to be present and actively involved. Oh, and I see a question. Yes, if you miss one of the parts of the series, you can watch the recordings. My plan is to record all of them and post links on the CTL website for you. Again, assuming everything goes according to plan. So what does it mean to be present in an online course? That's not hard to do in a face-to-face course, obviously, because you are actually physically present in every class, right? You're in the classroom, you're interacting with your students in a multitude of ways. But this is obviously a little bit harder to do when you're teaching an online class, especially if you don't have a lot of synchronous interactions with the entire class. So it can unfortunately be really easy to go for several days without checking in with your students, or conversely, it can be really easy to get very overwhelmed and feel like you need to be on call 24/7 with your students when you're teaching online. And that's something that I've heard a lot about from faculty, this feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm just working all the time. Either way, whether it's in a face-to-face classroom or in an online classroom, research has consistently shown that a strong sense of instructor presence, along with frequent and meaningful interactions with your students, improves student persistence, satisfaction, and achievement in their courses, but particularly in online courses. So what does it mean to be there, to have presence with your online class? One strategy is to create a routine for when you will log in to a specific course, to monitor student activity, to do things like respond to questions or discussion posts, etc. So, you know, even putting this on your calendar, like every day from this time to this time, I'm going to check in with this class. And then from this time to this time, I'm going to check in with my other class. You also need to let students know when you're going to be doing that, how often and when you will be logging into the course, whether it's every day, whether it's every other day, so that they know what to expect. They know when you're going to be actively there. Similarly, you should encourage your students to do the same thing. Encourage them to log in a certain number of days each week to maintain steady progress. As you all probably learned this semester, or the spring semester, online courses require a lot of self-direction and a lot of good time management skills. So it can be really easy for students to fall behind if they don't have those skills already. So reminding them this is how frequently you should be checking in with the course and encouraging them to make a routine can also be really beneficial for them. You should also make efforts to be, you know, so-called visibly present and engaged in the course. So what does that mean? What are some ways that you can do that? So for instance, you might post weekly announcements in Canvas or via email to preview the week's content for students or to recap last week's content. This could just be an announcement that you make in Canvas. It could be a video that you post. There are a lot of different ways that you could do that. But that, again, it's this idea of a routine, like, hey, here I am, here's what we're doing, here's what you can expect for the week, can really go far in keeping students with you and knowing that you're there, as opposed to just this, you know, faceless entity who's giving them assignments to do and things to read. Another thing that you might do, and maybe you probably are all already doing these things, have consistent weekly online office hours. It could be an open Zoom room that you have that students can pop into, knowing that you're going to be there at this certain time every week. Or it could even just be something as simple as during this time, I'm going to be sitting at my computer every week or every other day, so that they know they can, if they send you an email during that time, you're going to be there and you can respond promptly to answer a question or to help them with something. So again, a lot of different ways that you can do this. Respond in a timely fashion to questions that might be posted in a class forum or sent to you via email. I know that it can be really frustrating for students and for all of us, really, if we send a question to somebody and we don't get a response. It feels like we've just sent it out into the void, right? And nobody's listening. And similarly, participate in discussion boards or online forums that you might have assigned to students, so that it's not just them engaging with each other, but they can see that you're engaging with them as well. And one thing that I want to add to that is that it doesn't mean that you have to respond to every single post from your students, especially if you have 25 students in a class and you're teaching 5 classes. That's not necessarily feasible. But, you know, if you post every now and then and you are showing them that you're engaging, even if you're just answering or engaging with one particular post, the other students in the class will see that and they'll know you're there. Does that make sense? Okay. So the next strategy or best practice is to be communicative. This is vital with our online students. And I think communication and presence really go hand in hand. Again, since you don't have this opportunity to be face-to-face with your students in the same way as in a traditional classroom, where you can see on their faces if they might be confused or feeling lost about something that you're trying to explain, or to add clarification in the moment, to see, to answer questions that might arise extemporaneously. It's vital that you are diligent in communicating with your students frequently. So one thing that the research tells us is that one of the most highly demanded instructor practices in online teaching is to give frequent reminders and updates. As we already discussed, distance education requires a lot of self-direction and time management. And again, which our young students, maybe not our more experienced students, but some of our younger students might really struggle with that. And those who are new to the online classroom in general. So they really appreciate and they benefit from frequent reminders about things like upcoming due dates, maybe quizzes that they have to take, readings they have to do, discussions, all of those kinds of things. It is also really beneficial, and I would say this goes for face-to-face classes too. Articulate a timeline for your responses as well as your preferred mode of communication with students. Asynchronous modes of communication like email often become the primary modes of communication with our students in an online course. And as I already mentioned, it's really important to be mindful and responsive to our students and their inquiries. But you also need to respect your own boundaries and your own capacities as an instructor, because you've got a lot going on and it's so easy to get overwhelmed by this onslaught of email coming from students. And you don't want to spend all of your time fighting that mountain, right? So let your students know that you'll respond to them within a certain period of time. So for instance, I usually tell my students, if you email me during the week, Monday through Friday, I'll respond to your question within 24 hours. If you email me on the weekend, it'll probably be within 48 hours or on Monday at some point in time. Because I don't know about you, I get student emails at like 3 o'clock in the morning, and I'm asleep at that time because I'm old and I don't stay up late. But sometimes, you know, they expect you to have responded right away. So be real with them about what they can expect from you in terms of response time. And also let them know what your preferred mode of communication is. If you like to use your call and email, if you want them to communicate via campus, or via Canvas rather, maybe via phone or text messages. I'm not necessarily advocating for one avenue over another. The choice is yours. But just let them know what you prefer and what the best way to reach out to you is. And Canvas does have a lot of different tools that can help you streamline your messaging, especially if the prospect of flooding your personal inbox with email causes anxiety. I know it causes anxiety for me, so having them contained within Canvas might be really valuable, I think. Okay. Next, you want to be organized. Online instructors absolutely have to be organized, particularly when it comes to setting up your course materials in Canvas. If students aren't able to navigate those materials easily, they will undoubtedly get frustrated or even give up. And again, the research tells us that poor online course design and organization play a large role in diminishing student motivation, satisfaction, and retention. So here are just a few ways that you can make sure your course is easily navigable. First of all, take advantage of the student preview function in Canvas. If you've never used it before, it's really helpful. It lets you see what your students see when they enter your course. You can come at it from the student's perspective, experience the steps that they'll need to go through to access everything. And sometimes you might not realize that something is kind of clunky until you actually have to do it yourself the way a student has to do it. So I highly recommend this. It can be really helpful. Also, provide some guideposts for your students to help them learn how to navigate online materials, especially if they're coming to this course with limited computer skills, like some of you mentioned earlier, talking about the things that they struggle with, or if they've never taken an online course before, it can be a pretty steep learning curve for a lot of people. So, for instance, you might give them an orientation document that includes some screenshots of what the course looks like in Canvas at the beginning of the semester, and that offers directions about, you know, click here to submit an assignment, or click on these folders to find the modules for each week, however you organize your course. Just giving them kind of those visual cues can be really helpful. These guideposts might also be things that you put in Canvas itself, like click the link above to submit your assignments, because sometimes those automatic headings aren't always really intuitive to students. I've certainly had that experience with my own students who claimed they had used, Blackboard was the LMS that we used at my previous institution. They had all said they had used Blackboard before, but I would still have them coming to ask, now, how do I submit an assignment again? So, you know, those kinds of guideposts can be really helpful in making it a little bit more user-friendly for students who may not be acclimated to the online environment. Use folders and pages when you are organizing your course in Canvas, but use them meaningfully. So for instance, perhaps all course materials are organized into weekly folders, something I just mentioned. But also be mindful and think about how those folders and pages relate to one another. For example, if a student has to click out of one folder to access another required component of a given module, like a video that they have to watch, that's going to make them pretty frustrated pretty quickly, I think. So that said, you also want to make sure that you're balancing scrolls versus clicks in your online course design. So too many folders, just like not enough folders, can hinder students' progress. So while you don't want your course page in Canvas to just be one long page that they have to keep scrolling through, it likewise should not be a complex maze of nested folders within folders within folders that require 1,000 clicks to find anything. I see a question here. Are there links we can provide on how to use Canvas, access tech support, etc.? I think there are. You might go to the ELC student page. Oh, somebody's answering, yes. Yeah, go to the ELC page, especially the student page, and I think there are probably some resources there. And that's a great idea, giving your students these resources, reminding them that they exist, because students often don't know or aren't aware of all the great resources that exist within the college. Giving them reminders about that can be really helpful as well. Okay, so as well as balancing scrolls and clicks, you also want to ensure just plain old readability and visual appeal of your course. You know, good old information design principles still hold true here. You want to break up long sections of text with some white space, use headings and subheadings to help them find things quickly, include relevant images that might be helpful to them or can help explain a concept. This doesn't have to be like graphic designer quality, obviously, but those kinds of little things that can make it easier to read and a little bit more navigable and easy to find things can be really helpful for your students. One caveat about this is that make sure you are not sacrificing accessibility for beauty. We're going to talk about accessibility a little bit later, but that's something you always want to keep in mind. And then finally, you want to chunk your information. Students respond to and retain more information when it's presented to them in shorter segments. You know, we all know about short attention spans, and I feel like that's just getting worse in the digital age, as we're able to just click on things whenever we're interested. But that holds true here too, and not only for our students, for us as well. I know that when I click on a video and it's like 20 minutes long, I don't want to watch it either. So for instance, if you're putting lecture videos in your course, you probably want to make them 2 to 5 minutes long to maximize student viewing and attention. Doesn't mean you can't cover all of the same material. It just means that you need to break it up into smaller, more digestible pieces. And I hear, when you're talking folders, is that modules? I think so. I will say I don't have a ton of experience with Canvas specifically, but it's the same thing. Whatever the organizing principle is within Canvas that you can use to group information together, that will be helpful. Okay, are we all doing okay so far? I'm not seeing any big questions pop up in the chat. Okay, thumbs up. Okay. I'm talking a lot. This is not necessarily my favorite mode, but keep putting those questions in the chat and I will do my best to answer them for you. Okay, so I'm just gonna keep going. That's okay. So next, you have to be clear. Clarity and transparency are obviously always good practice in the classroom, but especially so in the online classroom, where again, you don't always have that opportunity to offer nuanced explanations that you might provide in the face-to-face classroom. And in the online classroom, a lot of our instructions probably come in the form of writing. That means students have to interpret it. Which is different than when you are listening to someone explain something. You can ask questions in the moment. So it can be a little bit trickier, I think. So obviously, you want to make sure any instructions that you provide are crystal clear. And you want to aim for a balance between thorough directions, but also manageable directions. So one thing I always like to talk about is something called transparent assignment design. This is one particular proven approach that it's a model of assignment design that calls for instructors to articulate an assignment's purpose, task, and criteria for evaluation for students. I can provide you with resources about this if you're interested. Feel free to email me. I have some resources on the CTL website as well. I can even do an entire session about it because I have written and published about this and done research about it. So if you want a session about that, let me know because I'm all about it. You might also consider, I think this is a really, oh good, I'm seeing lots of interest, great. You might also consider creating a brief in formal video in which you explain an assignment to your students to augment any written instructions and flesh out any details. Oh, somebody asked purpose blank criteria. So it's oops, sorry. I clicked out of the PowerPoint. It's purpose, task, criteria. And again, I can send you materials. I can put together a session about it. It's actually really interesting and really simple. Simple, but really effective. Okay, so instructions. I love this idea of a quick video that just offers some additional explanation to students about an assignment. I've heard some faculty talk about doing that. I think that's a really great idea. Next, providing some examples, relevant examples of completed assignments specifically, perhaps both successful and unsuccessful attempts at an assignment can be really helpful. Could also be real world examples of a particular assignment, especially if it's an authentic assessment task. I'm going to talk more about authentic assessments in the next webinar next week. But also examples that help illustrate concepts, especially abstract concepts for students that can help them gain a better understanding of expectations. This can help students learn not only what is expected from them for this particular assignment, but also within the discipline. This is especially important for new students or unacculturated students. They might not know what academic work looks like in a particular discipline. For concept examples, you can also source existing examples from venues like YouTube or TED Talks. That can provide a different spin on explaining a concept or a topic and allow students to hear another voice in the field. That can be really helpful for students. You want to provide clear timelines for your students, especially in terms of when things are due. Again, back to that idea of students have to be really self-directed. They have to have good time management. So as such, they really want to know when things are due, give them reminders, make those things really clear. Rubrics. Utilize rubrics to clearly articulate your evaluation criteria for students, even on small assignments. And I'm going to warn you in advance, rubrics are like love language for me. I am super passionate about rubrics. I love them. I think they're really helpful. And the research supports that. The use of rubrics has been shown to precipitate improved comprehension, deeper learning, and better performance by students. They can also reduce student anxiety by allowing them to plan their approach for a given assignment and focus their efforts with purpose. Does everybody know what a rubric is? Do they know what I mean when I say rubric? You know, a document that explains the criteria for evaluation and how grades are attached and things like that. Okay, good deal. I'm being 100% honest with you when I say I love rubrics. I could talk about them for days and days. Good, I'm not the only one. All right, last on my list here for clarity is the practice of scaffolding learning activities and giving your students opportunities to practice important tasks and skills before submitting them in kind of higher stakes forms of assessment. In the face-to-face classroom, you might do a lot of modeling of skills that you don't really realize that you're doing, that you're not aware of. So maybe it's how to solve a particular kind of problem, how to engage in a particular way of thinking, how to connect concepts, all of those kinds of things. But this doesn't always happen as naturally in the online classroom. It can, but not always. As such, we really have to work to be more purposeful about finding ways we can break up assignments, give them opportunities to really practice those skills in a low stakes environment where it's not going to affect their entire course grade. This can also give you the opportunity to give your students some formative feedback on their process so they can learn what they need to improve before they have to tackle those larger assignments, those more important or more higher stakes assignments. You know, kind of checking in with your students. All right, engagement, something that a lot of you already brought up. There's a wealth of information that confirms the efficacy and impact of active learning strategies and student engagement in fostering student learning and student satisfaction. And it is just as important, if not more so, in the online classroom as it is in the face-to-face classroom. Of course, student engagement probably will look and feel different in the online environment. And the things that you do in your traditional face-to-face classroom might not translate kind of on a one-to-one basis into your online classroom. So it might take a little bit of creativity, but it is absolutely possible. And as I mentioned previously, just a reminder, I'll be hosting a panel discussion with some awesome faculty members, including Mindy Bailey, who's here with us today. They're coming from a range of disciplines. This is going to be on July 23rd, and I'll remind you about that at the end. And it's going to be focusing on how do we engage our students in an online environment. So I'm just going to give some quick ideas here and some quick principles here, and we'll dig into it more deeply on the 23rd, okay? So one kind of golden rule, I think, for any kind of student engagement is that you need to vary your participation modalities. In other words, give your students a multitude of ways to engage and interact with you in the classroom. And to engage with one another, as well as to engage with the course material. Some students, for instance, might do really well in a large class discussion, while some might prefer just engaging with a few other class members. Some might really prefer individual engagement activities. Some might really like discussion. Some might prefer writing-based activities. Some might like to make videos. There are all kinds of things to consider. But varying those modalities can ensure that all students get the opportunity to be engaged and to be engaged in a way that is meaningful and comfortable to them. So just a few possibilities for student engagement. Obviously, I already mentioned this, but finding ways to create smaller groups of students within the larger class can help allow for wider student participation rather than just you know, for those few students that we all have who are really the most vocal, the most confident, the most readily participatory. So a lot of ways you can do this. You can utilize breakout rooms in Zoom, obviously, for small group discussion, even though you won't be able to observe all of them at once, as you might be able to do in the face-to-face classroom. You can also create smaller groups for discussion threads. I have one colleague who was really uncomfortable with the online environment and was struggling with some of the technology. So what she ended up doing was creating small discussion groups, and students did email back and forth with each other for discussions. And she was part of each group and would chime in, and she said it worked really well for her. So there are a lot of different ways that you can do this. This also has the added benefit of helping to create more community with your students and them with one another, because that can be really difficult in a larger group, especially when they might only see, you know, little squares in the gallery view in Zoom. They don't have that face-to-face interaction with each other in the same way. Online discussions are obviously a tried and true component of distance learning. And I think a lot of faculty have actually discovered their value as a supplement to the face-to-face classroom as well. And they can take on many forms. Could be asynchronous threaded discussions, could be synchronous chats like we're doing right here today in this webinar, could be email threads like I mentioned. I think one key to success for these discussions is to provide good structure and clear expectations for these discussions. I mean, I don't know about you, but I've certainly had an online discussion board in a class where I asked students to respond to one another. And, you know, I didn't do it the right way, and I didn't give them expectations for what I wanted their responses to look like. And I would get a lot of, yeah, I agree, sounds good, what he said. You know, that's not what we're looking for when it comes to meaningful interaction. So giving them clear guidelines about those things. Clarifying maybe staggered deadlines for, this is when your initial post is due for this threaded discussion, this is when your response is due, and maybe having them always due on the same days, Mondays and Thursdays or something like that, so that students, again, that idea of clear timelines and structure can be very helpful for them. It's wise to distinguish between expectations for original posts and responses to others if you're asking for those, and you know, offering guidance for those. It's always a good idea to offer really good guiding questions for students in a discussion to model the kind of dialogue that you're expecting, rather than saying, okay, read this chapter and then post something about it on the discussion board. You're probably not going to get exactly what you're looking for. You're probably not going to get some of that higher order thinking that you are hoping for. So give them a little bit more guidance about the kinds of things you want. And especially students, but especially the younger students, will likely need some help and direction, like I said, for engaging in those kind of higher order thinking skills. And if you haven't done it before, you might also think about trying some peer instruction and collaboration in your course. There's a ton of research that supports the efficacy of providing students with opportunities to collaborate with one another and work with each other in the learning process. Peer instruction in particular has been shown to improve conceptual learning with students, as well as problem-solving abilities. It can help level up students who might not have the same background as other students, less background knowledge, and decrease student attrition. If you're familiar with the work of Eric Mazur from Harvard, he's done a ton of great research on this idea of peer instruction. Again, there's a ton of different ways that you can do this. You could have small problem-solving groups. during synchronous class meetings, maybe they work on a problem together in a breakout group if it's synchronous, and then they come back together and discuss it. Could be asynchronous group assignments that they work on outside of class, like working on a case study or something like that. Students could even take turns being discussion leaders or moderators on a discussion thread. It could be something even as simple as helping facilitate the creation of study groups amongst the class. This also gets back to the idea of helping create community and support within the class. Students can feel really isolated in the online class environment. I think we all probably felt that this spring as we were working from home. So ways that you can incorporate that peer-to-peer interaction has a lot of benefits. See, Keith has mentioned that sometimes students do the I agree response to meet the discussion board requirement. We've all seen it, I'm sure. Providing direction for responding to a prompt definitely helps. How do I feel about asking students to meet minimum word counts within the discussion? That's a really good question. I definitely think that can be helpful, but I think there needs to be more to it than that. Minimum word count obviously gets them to realize that they can't just say, yeah, I agree. But I would still encourage more guidance and even modeling what a valuable response looks like. And even say, you know, it doesn't have to be 2 pages, but I do think more than minimum word count is probably helpful, but it's definitely a good place to start, I think, if that's something that you wanna try. And Rachel says she has minimum word counts in her discussion boards and it works really well. Yeah. Ooh, how to control free writer problem in group assignments. Group work is another area that I could talk about forever and ever. So if any of you are interested in a session about facilitating effective group work, I'm more than happy to put that together. I'll also direct you again to the CTL website. I have some online resources there. So there's some research, there's a lot of research about what's free writing, also called social loafing in education circles when it comes to, you know, people writing the coattails of other students in the group work. So I'm so happy to do a session about that. There's also some really interesting research about creating cohesion in groups, how to get groups to work really well together, that I think is really interesting to think about as well. So I'll add that to my list. Okay. I'm gonna keep going if y'all are okay with that. Okay, so be inclusive. Obviously, it's required that any course that we teach is fully accessible and inclusive for all students. You all know this. This is not new. And we could spend an entire week, we could spend an entire semester talking about accessibility requirements, and then the whole next semester talking about diversity and inclusivity in the classroom. These are huge topics and hugely important topics. Sadly, we do not have time for all of that today. So I'm just going to touch on a few basic ideas. Are you all familiar with the concept of universal design for learning? So at the heart, so I'll explain what this is a little bit. At the heart of the UDL philosophy is basically the idea that in order to teach effectively, you have to reach out to all of your students. And those students are going to come from a variety of backgrounds, expectations, abilities, and learning styles. I'm going to say learning preferences, not learning styles, because the research on learning styles has debunked that myth. And so basically you have to consider the needs of diverse people from the beginning of your class. So UDL means designing your course with accessibility in mind, regardless of whether or not you have students with official letters of accommodation for diagnosed disabilities. So the three basic tenets of UDL are providing multiple means of representation, of action and expression, and engagement. So that you're presenting the material to them in a variety of different ways, you're giving them a variety of ways to express their learning, and a variety of ways to engage. Remember, we already talked about multiple modalities of participation and engagement, so that's part of the UDL philosophy. So I think in a nutshell, it just means making sure everybody can access and appreciate and learn from and engage with your course, regardless of who they are, where they come from, or what they bring. So in terms of accessibility, some very basic things that you can do are including captions or transcripts for videos, incorporating what's called alt text tags with images. This is really easy to do, and it's just a brief description of what the image is so that people who have a sight disability can appreciate it and understand what is being conveyed by the image. Using styles within any documents that you use. And all that does is distinguish heading levels from regular paragraphs and subheadings that for people who are having to use a screen reader, the screen reader can access those, and that makes it more understandable for the student. Also using high contrast colors and readable fonts and texts. Again, so that people who are unsighted can appreciate it and read it more clearly. I'm saying this all with the caveat that this just scratches the surface of all of the considerations to think about. Susan is saying her son is red-green colorblind. That is really important to consider when you're choosing your colors. You'll notice that I'm using, my text is white on a black background so that it's readable. Ooh, Calibri is the easiest font to read for those with dyslexia. That's interesting. I haven't read that. I do know that there is a dyslexic font that you can download and use for free. I've used it before, where the letters are weighted at the bottom and things like that. That's supposed to be easier for dyslexic students to be able to read. I can't vouch for that, but I think that's also really interesting to think about. I'm not trying to oversimplify this. Again, back to the ELC, they've got some great resources about accessibility. They even have an online Canvas, a self-paced Canvas course about accessibility that you can take, and it has some amazing information in it. I highly recommend it. So just all of that is to say that this is just the tip of the iceberg, but it is something to keep in mind, this accessibility piece. And any of you who may have done Quality Matters training are probably already familiar with some of this. In terms of diversity and inclusivity, one essential thing that I think is pretty easy to do is to make sure you're providing a variety of representations in your classroom, whether it's through the examples or models that you include or that you choose, the materials, the authors of texts, the videos you choose to include, even the pronouns that you use. All of this can help your students see all different kinds of people being represented in your course. And again, the caveat, this is just the bare minimum. I am not trying to oversimplify these topics. They are They are huge, and we could talk about them forever, and they are vital. They are crucial. But I just want to make sure that you have an awareness about this, since we're just looking at general principles today. Okay. Okay, I'm looking at the clock. I'm going to keep going. I just have one more major principle for us to consider, and that might be one of the most important of all, and that is to be human. Above all else, and especially during really stressful times like these, it is crucial to cultivate that human connection with your students. Acknowledge their humanity as well as your own. This can help a world, make a world of difference in your class. First, the physical energy and those nonverbal cues of immediacy that we can express to our students in the face-to-face classroom, things like vocal inflection, smiles, reassuring nods, eye contact, all of those things that are present in the face-to-face classroom are largely absent in our online classroom. So it's vital that we remember that when we're communicating with our online students. So I always like to remind people, you have got to be mindful of your tone when you're communicating with your students and how it might be misconstrued by others when unaccompanied by some of those other nonverbal cues, particularly in writing. Because we might put something in writing and we mean it one way, but somebody reads it another way. I know I've certainly been on the other end of that before. So try to infuse your writing with warmth and support. Instead of saying things like, don't forget your quiz this week. If you don't take it, you're gonna fail. Say something maybe a little bit more supportive. Like, okay, I know you've all got a lot going on right now, so this is just a reminder about your quiz coming up this week. Please let me know if you need any help with any of these concepts we've been discussing before you take it. Saying the same basic thing, but with a different feel. That probably makes students feel a little bit more encouraged. Similarly, it can be helpful to foster individual touch points with your students and purposefully invite them to reach out to you, whether it's during office hours or a phone call that you set up with them, etc. Certainly, all students, whether it's face-to-face or online, might not take advantage of these opportunities on their own. I mean, I can't tell you how many faculty I've talked to who complain about, my students never come to my office hours. I mean, that's just how it is. But I think it's really interesting to note that there's one study that shows that it's often, especially in an online class, it's often because they simply forget about those office hours. And they're not sure how to use them, especially when they're younger. So it's also worth considering that struggling students might feel anxious or cautious about asking for help. I mean, I don't know about you, but when I was a freshman in college, I was a little bit scared to go talk to some of my professors. So sending them pointed reminders about those office hours, even personal invitations individually to students can make a world of difference in helping them feel welcome and giving them that invitation to engage with you one-on-one. Another great strategy is just to make sure that you're including things like photos, videos, and recordings of you. And help them remember that you are a real live person and you're the one teaching this class. And it can kind of put a face on you as an instructor. They can hear your voice. They can see what you look like. And P.S., these do not have to be perfect. You know, you do not have to have a ring light behind your computer for every video that you shoot. You don't have to have a perfect script. You don't have those things when you're in the classroom, so you don't have to have those online either. It just kind of, again, increases that sense of humanity between you and your students, and encourage your students to do the same thing. That can help build that sense of community that I've mentioned a few times already. And having that sense of community has been shown to improve student performance and satisfaction with a course. One simple assignment could be to have your students post a photo or a brief introduction of themselves or a little video. Maybe they could record themselves explaining a concept. Something that I've done with my students is have them send me a selfie of them, something really informal that shares something about themselves. So like I had students who were in the band who sent me a picture of themselves with their instrument, or a student who sent me a picture of him with his dog. I will always remember that one because that dog was adorable, and I did not expect it from that particular student because it was like a little Yorkie, and this was a great big guy. It was awesome. So anything that kind of shares those things with them and humanizes you. And so part of that is also this idea of just sharing a little bit of yourself. Show your personality. It is okay. One easy way and highly recommended way is to post an introductory video, introducing yourself at the start of the semester. During lectures and discussions, you can weave in mentions of your hobbies or your interests. Invite your students to do the same thing. I always love to ask my students at the start of the semester, you know, what's your favorite movie? What's your favorite TV show or musician? Or ask them about their pets. Obviously, I love hearing about their pets. And the bonus is here, if this is an online course and students are at home, chances are you might even get to see the pets, which is pretty fun. I know my cat was all about jumping on my lap while I was in the middle of a Zoom meeting. So, you know, fun for everybody. And then finally, I probably don't need to say this, but it's worth saying, you know, you have to have a heart. Even though teaching online may not be everybody's first choice of teaching modalities, even when you're feeling the stress of the semester, it might be really difficult, but it is always important, always important to practice compassion with your students, convey enthusiasm, positivity, and encouragement with them. If students don't feel like their professor wants to be there, or if they feel like their professor isn't enjoying what he or she is doing and doesn't want to be there, then they probably aren't going to enjoy it and won't want to be there either. Something also really important to consider is that in times of stress and disruption, they are likely as anxious and as overburdened as you are. Some of you mentioned that when I asked the question earlier about what students were struggling with. You know, they might be struggling with job loss and taking care of their families and food insecurity and all of those kinds of things, as well as stressors like lack of reliable technology or internet access, or even a private space to do their work. So a little flexibility, a little understanding and encouragement can really go a long way. All right, it is 12:04. How did that hour go by so fast? As we kind of wrap up here, I have one more question I want to ask you. What changes are you starting to think about making to your next online course? Maybe it's something you've already been thinking about. Maybe it's something that you're starting to think about based on things we talked about today. Take a few seconds, think about it. And then if you feel comfortable sharing, I'd love to hear some of your ideas. It can be in the chat, or it can be if you want to voice it. That'd be great too. Susan says, learn Canvas better, more videos, games, more reminders, better communication, making brief videos explaining assignments, rubrics, yay, rubrics! Computer was able to withstand the downloads, yes. Make Canvas look more interesting, peer instruction, collaboration, awesome. Rubrics, yay. Rubric love, I'm thrilled. Choices to use synchronous or asynchronous interaction, I love that. Diverse ways to use discussion boards, these are great. Awesome. Well, hopefully you guys have a lot of food for thought after day. I know we covered a lot of material, but like I mentioned, we're going to dig into some more things a little more closely. So additional webinars and resources that are coming up next week on the 14th. Oh, thank you, Ramiro. We have, I'll be doing another webinar, Rethinking Assessment in Online Teaching. That's going to be 10 to 11 a.m., another Zoom session just like this. If you registered for it online using the form that I sent you, just like this one, I'll do the same thing where I send you a link and some materials. July 23rd, we have the faculty panel discussion on fostering student engagement in online courses. For that panel, we're going to have Deborah Cardenas from biology, Mindy Bailey from humanities, Pam Gator from sociology, and Megan Cardwell Wilson from dance. And they're going to share some of their strategies and tips and advice for engaging students. And then I want to give one more plug for the CTL website. It's on Inside Colin. It's the teaching and learning link on Inside Colin, but here's the address for you here. As well as the ELC resources. There are some amazing resources and tools there for you there. Also, feel free to email me if you have questions or if you want to talk about something more. I'm so happy to visit with you individually as well. Obviously, I love talking about teaching. It's my thing. It's my job. That's what I'm here for. So please don't hesitate. And thank you. I appreciate the interest that you expressed in some of the other topics that I mentioned. So I'll work on, I'm working on some of my fall offerings right now. So I'll think about a session on group work, on rubrics, on transparent assignment design. So I'm excited that you're interested in those things. So I'm gonna stop sharing. Thanks everybody for being here today. I'm excited that I got a chance to meet all of you virtually, and hopefully I will see more of you next week at our next webinar.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Y'all have a great day.
Bye, you too.
Thank you. You too, Allison. Have a great day.
Thank you.